Hello, Black Sheep. Hello, Chosen Ones. So, my name is Jenna. I am a psychic medium. I'm an author of 2 published books, and I'm also an intuitive tarot reader, which you will find if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I use my readings as the purpose to help people heal what's keeping them stuck in life so that they're able to transform their life and go towards their calling. And that's always the premise behind any readings that I post or any personal readings. And yes, I still offer personals. If you are interested, please book by email. So today's episode of the Black Sheep Society is going to be on near-death experiences. So that's something that I am a little familiar with. I have had 3 in my 44 years of life on this planet. And it's something that creates a profound experience. So it typically is quite life-changing for those of us who've gone through something like that. So if you've never had one, it's something that is kind of a really unique experience. All 3 that I've had were quite different in nature. I had them at different points in my life. So what is a near-death experience, or an N.D.E? Well, they're life-transforming experiences. Sometimes it's happening under deep general anesthesia. Other times it can happen due to cardiac arrest when the heart actually stops beating. Sometimes it's during a traumatic event or experience that borders on death, or some people kind of teeter in and out of death. So all of these typically include an out-of-body experience where they account that their soul has left their body and they're able to see the surrounding people and events taking place, but they're no longer in their physical body. They are sometimes described as otherworldly, usually explained as very peaceful, very loving energy that happens as a result. So some of these can happen creating like a psychic experience. Sometimes they're conscious, sometimes they're semi-conscious, but it's always recalled or remembered experiences that happen while they are either approaching death or during life-threatening conditions. So to begin our first story, I was about 17 years old. I was a teenager. I had gone and spent my first summer with my dad. We had a lot of fun. I was there, I want to say 6 or 8 weeks at the time. And I had a promise made to my mom that I would return at the end of the summer and I would finish out high school where we lived in Colorado. So I kept my word. We had a great summer, learned to ride horses, and we did a lot of outdoor activities. My dad lived on a working ranch at the time, and so we had a great time. I was in pretty good shape at that point, young teenager, full of life. No major medical issues up to that point in my life. I was pretty healthy. So following returning home, I think school started within the week for me, and I would have been, I think, junior in high school that year. So I had lots of social activities and friends and, adventures planned, right? Because what teenager wants to sit at home all the time? So within a week of returning home, I remember coming down with a cold. Didn't think anything of it. It was fall, it was cold and flu season starting up, things like that. So I come down with a cough, really. And I felt a little tired, a little run down, short of breath. I thought, it's just traveling, getting back into the groove of things, going back to school. And so I just thought it was a cold, didn't think anything of it. So a few days into this cold, I remember having been woken awake in the middle of the night by an awful Charlie horse in the back of one of my calves. And I thought, gosh, that was like one of the most painful Charlie horses I think I've ever had. And it literally woke me up out of a dead sleep. I couldn't straighten my leg. It was excruciatingly painful. And I remember feeling like the pain started in my calf and that it started to travel up the back of my leg. And I can't remember for sure if I woke my mom up or not. I think I just massaged it as best I could, tried to get comfortable, and went back to sleep. So the next day, I remember waking up feeling really unable to complete a full sentence. Like, it was hard to feel like I had enough air in my lungs to complete a whole sentence. And that was something I had never experienced before. But still being a young teenager, just thinking, gosh, this cold is really miserable. There's just, it's not getting any better. So I remember I had a speech due in my English class, and we had to get up and verbally give our speech, and it only had to be a minute or so long, but we had to get up in front of the whole class and do that. And I remember I couldn't finish a sentence, that I was that exhausted, that out of breath, that I just couldn't. It was like I stopped after every 3 words, just felt like I couldn't get enough air. And so I remember my English teacher said, you could do better than that. I'm going to fail you on this test, and that you're going to have to redo it at a different time. So I was like, fine, whatever. So that evening when I got home, I remember having a lot of pain in my chest, in my rib cage, and I could pinpoint exactly where it was in my ribs, and it was in the upper half on my right side, so right about here. And I remember I could pinpoint, I could literally touch it and know that that's exactly where the pain was. And my mom was like, something's just not right there. I don't like the fact that you sound short of breath. I don't like the fact that you've got pain in your chest. I told her that I had that weird Charlie horse in my leg. So we called the nurse line at the doctor's office because it was after hours. And the doctor who happened to be on call that night said, is there anything else going on? Well, she traveled recently. She flew, twice in the last 6 or 8 weeks. She's taking birth control pills, and otherwise she's pretty healthy. And he said, it's a real small chance, but with the symptoms that she's presenting, I would really like it if you would take her to the local emergency room and have her checked for blood clots. And we thought, yeah, right, that's not what's going on. There's no possibility. She's young. Young kids don't have blood clots, right? So we went anyway, and I remember I wasn't really nervous. I just remember feeling really tired, again, really short of breath, and just no real energy. And my mom told me, you look a little green, honestly. You look like your color's off, and I don't like this at all. So we hurried up. We got to the local emergency room, which was just a few minutes from our home. And the doctors, they check your blood oxygen. They put a little thing on your finger. They take your blood pressure, and they're like, well, her vitals look really good. Like, her blood oxygen level's still at like 97, 98%. So we don't think that she's got a blood clot, but we're going to run some tests and we're going to figure this out. So I remember the first thing they did, because I was having difficulty breathing, was take a chest x-ray. And immediately it showed something in the area of my chest that I could point to, that I knew there was something causing pain, but I didn't know what it was. And so they said, well, that could be any number of things, so we've got to do some other tests. And I remember one of the tests was, I can't remember what it's called, but it has to do with checking your blood oxygen level in your vein before it goes to the artery or something. And so they stick this tiny little needle into my wrist trying to hit the vein. And I remember it was excruciatingly painful. So I made them stop. I was like, you got to do something else, because that's not going to work. And so they said, well, there's one other thing we can try to see what's causing this thing that was showing up on your x-ray. It's called a nuclear medicine study. So you get injected with this radioactive dye of some kind, and that as a result, you're able to actually see where the blood flows. And so we tried that. And so while I was doing that, I remember just feeling incredibly sick, like I was going to be actually vomit or something, and just feeling kind of out of it, kind of dizzy. And within about 30 minutes, they said, we're going to admit her to the hospital, because we're pretty sure she's got 2 massive blood clots in her lung, the size of dimes. And had she not come in tonight, she more than likely would have had a few hours to live. She would have actually passed away. So after figuring out that the on-call doctor was not wrong, that they did figure out I had 2 massive blood clots in my lung, I was admitted to the hospital for, I think it was 6 or 7 days. I'd never really been in the hospital for any real length of time at that point. It was like really life-altering at that point. So at the time that I was admitted, they started me on heparin therapy, massive blood thinners, to break up the clots. And because of where they were located in my lung, they didn't want them to continue to travel. So I was put on very strict bed rest for 6 or 7 days straight. I wasn't allowed to get up and go to the bathroom. I wasn't allowed to get up and shower. I couldn't get up and walk around. Literally, you had to lay in bed. They had these machines that would inflate and deflate on my legs to keep blood flowing in my lower extremities, because they said that there could have been potentially more blood clots lower in my body. They did ultrasounds and figured out that the blood clot actually broke through from my pelvis, not from my legs. So the Charlie horse was a strange symptom, because they didn't see any other blood clots in my calf, which is where I originally thought that it originated from. I later found out through genetic testing that I have something called a factor V Leiden mutation. So I'm more prone to blood clots because of a genetic mutation when I am either on some sort of contraception, birth control pills, or hormones. One of those being during pregnancy. I've had 4 live births, and I've had a miscarriage in between my first 2, and they think it was partially because of this mutation. So lots of crazy things happened as a result. So the first night in the hospital was probably the worst. I was still in a lot of pain, still having difficulty breathing. They come in every few hours when you're on blood thinners, and you feel like a pincushion, because it's constant checking to see what your therapeutic level of this clotting factor happens to be. And so literally about every 4 to 6 hours around the clock, somebody was coming in and taking blood. And it was that way for the next, I want to say like 6 weeks. I had regular blood draws. I went home on blood thinners. I can't remember. I think I was on pill form at that point, and then later down the road when I had my first child was when I found out that I would have to take daily injections 3 times a day in my stomach of heparin, which is a blood thinner that's you put it into like fatty muscular tissue, and it doesn't cross the placenta, so the baby's not in any sort of danger of, brain bleeds or anything like that. So lots and lots of stuff changed for me over the course of a few months. The first night in the hospital, I remember after all the visiting hours had ended and my mom had gone home for the night because she had to work the next day. She was a single parent, so, it's like she didn't want to leave, but she needed to be able to go to work the next day, so she went home. I told her, it's fine, I'm okay. I'm okay with being here by myself. It's fine. So that night I'm drifting off to sleep, and I remember it was probably in the middle of the night, maybe like 2 or 3 in the morning. I woke up because I felt like somebody was touching my hand on each side of me. I could feel a presence in the room. I could feel what felt like 2 energies, and I could physically see with my mind's eye my dad's mom on one side, my grandma Edith, and my mom's mom, Helen, on the other side. And I remember both of them were very reassuring, very comforting, both just kind of like stroking my hand, saying, don't worry about anything. We're here with you. We're going to make sure that you make a full recovery out of this, and you have nothing to worry about as long as you just trust us and know that you're going to get through this okay. So both of them had passed away about 6 months apart. I want to say I was like 12 or so when both of my grandmas had passed away. My dad's mom had multiple types of cancer. She had breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, but she actually died from a staph infection in the hospital. My mom's mom, my grandma Helen, she actually passed from complications from emphysema. She was a heavy smoker for many years. She was on oxygen at home and things like that for a long time, and she finally just decided enough was enough, and she refused food and medication, and so she literally starved herself until she finally passed from that. So that took about 4 or 5 months. They were some of my favorite people. I was really close to my mom's mom, my Grandma Helen, and she got me through a lot of things, and so it was very comforting to see both of them at my bedside. And I still wasn't 100% sure, like, was it medication that I was on? But I don't remember being on a bunch of pain medication. So I think I was mostly on just like IV fluids and then the blood thinners. And so at first I thought, well, maybe I dreamed that. And then I thought, no, that was so real. Like I could feel them sitting next to me. Almost like when someone sits on the edge of the bed and you're sitting there, you feel that pressure change, right? You feel like somebody sat down next to you. I could feel those things. And so the more I thought about it, the more I was like, no, that happened. Like I know that actually happened. So it took many months for me to recover. As a result, I had lasting damage to my lung. I ended up with asthma as a result of the damage in my lung. I thankfully never had more blood clots. Was very cautious with like sports and things like that. Several years later, I was pregnant with my third son, and we were in an auto accident, and I was on blood thinners at the time. So really very cautious of like, oh my gosh, internal bleeding, things like that. I went into early labor with him. Thankfully, they were able to stop it and we were both completely fine, but I had lasting damage to my spine, bulging discs and things like that as a result of the accident and the injuries. Let's see what else. So it took years and years for the damage to my lungs to actually be completely healed. Thankfully it has, like I've regained the capacity and able to breathe fine and everything. Don't really have much lasting asthma symptoms now. I did for probably a good 10 or so years post injury. So the biggest takeaway that I had from that was it started to make me question things about religion and spirituality and angels. And so I remember I would read books on the subject and near-death experiences and past lives and angels and spirit and just all these things. I just couldn't get enough information because I knew what had happened to me was real. And so I was very close to actually dying in that situation, but thankfully not close enough that I actually did. So that was my first experience in 1997. My second experience happened around 2008. I was going in for a scheduled surgery. I had had all 4 of my sons at that point. My youngest was probably 6 or 8 weeks old, and I was going in to get my tubes tied because I knew I was done. My family was complete. I knew I didn't want any more babies, and I was super high risk because of the previous blood clots. So I knew I didn't want to take the chance of, going through that again. So we were done. We made the decision together that, this is what's best for me. I want this. And so it was elective surgery that I went in for. I had just had a baby, so my body was still kind of in recovery mode. Thankfully, everything was good with that. And I remember I wasn't nervous going into the surgery. I had a really great obstetrician gynecologist. He was super thorough, really on top of everything. And I remember the morning of surgery, I just had like this real relaxed feeling. Like there was no reason to worry that anything would happen. So go into surgery, everything's fine. My husband at the time was with our kids, and so they were good. And I remember hearing one of the nurses talking to either the doctor or another nurse saying, keep a really close eye on this one because I don't like the way the blood pressure looks. And I could remember hearing the numbers of it, and it stuck with me this long. It was like 30/70. And I thought, what in the world? What am I dreaming? Because my eyes still weren't open. I still had the intubation tube in. And so I remember kind of trying to force myself to wake up, but it was extremely difficult. I remember just feeling so peaceful, and I remember thinking, if I don't wake up, it's okay. I know my kids will be okay. I know that heaven is real. I know I'm going to go to a different place. And I just remember having this really peaceful feeling around not waking up. And so I could hear commotion, but I couldn't see anything yet because I couldn't open my eyes, but I could hear it all. So a while later, I remember hearing one of the machines beeping, and that's what finally got me to open my eyes, was hearing buzzing or beeping of a machine. And so I kind of tried to open my eyes. I couldn't talk because the tube was still in. They said, let us pull this out, take a deep breath, blow out, and we're going to pull the tube out. And I was like, okay. So they get it out, and of course my throat's really sore, and I'm trying to form words, and I'm still really out of it. And the first thing I said to the nurse was, am I dead? Did I die? And she giggles for a split second, and she said, no, you're alive, just barely. And I was like, what happened? And she said, there was some complications during your surgery, and there was some internal bleeding. We managed to get it stopped, but your blood pressure dropped really, really low, dangerously low, and you were a little bit in jeopardy there for a while. We didn't know if you were going to pull through. And she said, we don't normally see blood pressure as low as it was, and people come back. And she said, so you're very lucky, because any longer and we would have lost you. And I told her, I said, I could hear you guys talking, but I couldn't open my eyes. And she said, well, you were real teetering on, not being with us for much longer. And so she said, we have heard stories of people saying they can hear stuff. We've heard that people can see things like out-of-body experiences. I personally did not have an out-of-body experience. I was in this very floaty, very peaceful place. There was glimpses of heaven that I've seen at other times, but not that time. And so I just remember hearing them kind of scrambling, like, hurry up, we got to get this back up. We've got to get her blood pressure back up. We're losing her. Hurry, hurry, hurry. And just like the commotion going on, I could hear it. And so when I'm telling this nurse, I could hear you guys, and she said, that's not uncommon. We're really trying to make sure that we could put y'all back together and patch you up and get you home to your family. And so I thanked her, and I told her, did I dream that? Did I imagine that? And she said, no, you heard what was going on in the room. And so I just was like, okay, well, that wasn't my imagination. I didn't dream it. That happened, that I actually knew what had happened to me. So I recover from that instance, and, life goes on. I'm okay. Everything's fine. And then go through, a lot of trauma in a divorce, and separate and lose custody of my kids and all those things. And then I went to go visit my dad, and we happened to go out drinking. And so in about 2012-ish, a few years later, we went out to one of the local bars where he lived that was just a few minutes from his house, and we were having a good time. There was live music, we were drinking, we were socializing, nothing out of the norm. It was things that we had done a million times when I went home to go visit. And a friend of his had gotten him some old-fashioned homemade moonshine, and he had gotten a couple of really big jars of it. And so by the time we had left the little bar, we had already probably had about 8 beers each between us. Way more than I normally would be capable of drinking. And then we went home, and we were like, well, the night's still early, let's open that bottle of moonshine. So we started drinking it, and it was really good, and we kept drinking and we kept drinking. So we polished off that whole bottle, and we started on the second bottle. And at that point, I don't have a lot of recollection of what happened. I somehow managed to get to my bed. And when I first started trying to wake up, I remember feeling like I couldn't breathe. And I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't sit up. I physically didn't have the strength. I was so completely intoxicated that I couldn't turn over and I couldn't move, but I couldn't breathe. And I remember hearing this voice in my head saying, "Get off your ass now." Like it was life or death, literally life or death. And I somehow took every ounce of strength that I had and forced myself to sit up. And I was in a pile of my own vomit from drinking so much. I had thrown up in my sleep. Thankfully, I was a stomach sleeper. So I literally was face down in a pile of my own vomit. And I still was so completely intoxicated at that time that I didn't know if I was coming or going. I was disoriented, I was wobbly, I was covered in vomit head to toe. But I knew I had to get up. And so I had forced myself to sit up. I was gasping for air. I had vomit up my nose. It was all down the front of me. And had I not pushed myself off and sat up, I would have suffocated. I have no doubt in my mind that I would have. So that voice that I heard was loud enough to startle me, to make me fight. And so whether it was God, a guardian angel, it was something that knew that I was about to die. And it was a sense of urgency that I had probably never felt before. So I sit up, I try and collect myself. I stumble downstairs to the shower and cleaned myself up as best I could, got rid of all the vomit and disgustingness off of myself. And I remember I didn't even have the energy to be able to make it back up to my room. So I was in the downstairs guest bedroom. And I remember wrapping myself in a towel and just passing out, laying on the couch. And the next morning I could hear my dad stumbling around trying to get up. Now, mind you, he's older than me and he drank at least as much, if not more, than I did. And he somehow got up and went to work the next day. Don't know how. He was sicker than a dog. And that whole day, I remember I drifted in and out of consciousness. I was there 1 minute and completely gone, zoned out the next. So my body was still trying to recover from all the alcohol that I had consumed, and I had vomited everything out that I possibly could and just could not get up. And so I think I got up and maybe got some water, went to the bathroom, and I just slept the rest of the next day. So my dad finally comes home and I'm still laying there on the couch in a towel, and he's like, "Are you okay?" He was like, "I know you got sick upstairs. I can smell it. What happened?" And I said, "I almost died. I literally almost died. I threw up. I took everything I had to sit up and it was all over me. So I came down here and I took a shower and I didn't have the energy to even get upstairs to go put on clothes again. I'm sorry. I'll clean up my mess, I can't do it right now. I'm sick as shit." And so he said, "I'm not worried about any of that or anything. Are you okay?" And I said, "I think I'll be okay, but I'm definitely done drinking for a long time, if ever." And so in my 20s, I really struggled with, drinking in excess, going through a really crummy divorce, losing custody of my kids and things like that is what started that cycle for me of drinking and partying and just doing stupid things that I wouldn't have probably done had my marriage not fallen apart and I didn't lose the things that were most precious to me, which was my family. So I was probably about 32 or 33 years old when this instance happened, and I'm in my 40s now. And as a result, I definitely stopped drinking. I might have a glass of wine or a beer or a margarita sporadically, but it makes me so sick now that I really try and stay away from it altogether. So that experience was one that I hope I never relive. As a result, it got me sober. It's something that I feel like got me closer to my spiritual side. I connect to higher realms when I channel, so guardian angels, God, source, spirit, the universe, deceased loved ones, things like that. And when I was in the in and out phase while I was laying on the couch, I remember I could see this woman. It was two women. One was my Aunt Connie that I never met. It was my dad's older sister. She passed away many years before I was ever born, so I never met her. But I always felt I had a lot of stuff in common with her. And I don't really know why. I just always felt like I did. And so I remember seeing her kind of like poke her head in the doorway and then disappear. Like she was checking on me. Like, are you okay? We're gonna check in on you periodically and make sure you're okay. And then there was another woman, an older woman who I didn't recognize. And I kept seeing her kind of, peek around the corner. I would feel her energy around when I would visit my dad at this house that he lived in. And so one night I remember asking him, do we have somebody in the family that looked like, and I described her. And he said, not that I can think of, but, it could be somebody that, is way back in the family that I don't know about. And so I felt like she was some sort of guardian angel. She felt like a little grandma. She came looking like she had like long dark hair, kind of hunched over a little bit, like wrapped in a blanket or a shawl. And she would just kind of shuffle through the kitchen periodically. I would see her. My dad's dog, Jake, could see her. He would bark in the middle of the night at a spot in the kitchen and turn on the lights, there's nothing there, but he could clearly see it, and I could just feel the presence was there. So I knew for a very long time that I was sensitive to energies around. And so this was part of me kind of coming into my spiritual gifts and realizing that the spiritual realm is very real. There were more than a few times in my life, all these events aside, that I picked up on energy that nobody else could see or feel. And so this was kind of part of a turning point for me, realizing that I had spiritual gifts that I needed to share. So there was one other instance that I can remember physically seeing a spiritual realm, and I can't recall exactly what caused me to see this. I don't know if it was like during one of these near-death experiences or not, but I remember thinking that it was a dream initially and realizing that it was not a dream, that I was physically or spiritually in this area, in this place. And at first I was in this beautiful, looked like a meadow of wildflowers. There were beautiful big trees and bright green grass and colors that don't exist in this realm. And so that's how I knew it was something completely different from our reality, the 3D that we live in. And there were vibrant shades of greens and reds and blues and yellows and purples and spectrums that we just can't see exist in other dimensions. And so as I'm kind of panning around and looking at this beautiful meadow, I see a man in the distance and he's motioning for me to come towards him. And I go towards this man, and as he turns to me, I recognize that it's Jesus. And he didn't look anything like I had been taught. He had very tan, very olive skin. He had green eyes, short hair, brown hair, and just this very gentle, welcoming, loving energy. And I can remember knowing that it was him and just feeling completely safe and extremely loved. And when I channel, when I work for the divine, because that's where all my spiritual gifts come from, is the divine, I feel that presence with me from time to time. Sometimes I channel messages directly from God, Source, Spirit, the universe, and other times it's other entities like angels, sometimes it's deceased loved ones. But what changed for me was knowing that when we pass, that our existence, our essence, it continues on, and that our physical vessel might expire, but we can choose to come back, we can reincarnate, we can learn more lessons, or we can choose to do work on the other side, that we always have free will to choose. And so I can recall that I was told As beautiful as it is here, you cannot stay. It's not your time. You're going to have all these different things that you have to achieve in your lifetime, and you have so many years left on your contract that you have to go back and you have to fulfill this. But you also have a choice. You can stay, but we really need you to go back. And so I remember getting the biggest hug, the most comforting, loving, accepting hug, and him saying, we'll see you one day, but today is not that day. You've got to go back. You've got to finish your soul's mission work. And I remember just thinking, I don't want to. Like, it's so beautiful here. It's so peaceful here. I don't want to leave. And he said, you have to. And so as much as I didn't want to, I remember coming back and waking up thinking, was that a dream? Did I imagine that? And I thought, I felt that hug. I felt it as much as I can tangibly feel, my own body. I could feel that energy. And so I knew that God was real. I knew that heaven was real. I knew that angels were real. And so I contemplated, well, what is my purpose? What am I really here to do? And the one thing that I remember him saying was that you have to help people heal. And so that is part of my purpose and my calling for why I'm here. So it took me many, many years after all of these crazy events, these near-death experiences, for me to focus my energy, develop my spiritual gifts, and to actually use them. I was probably 40 years old when I had my real spiritual awakening. Check out that podcast. It's our first episode. And so going through my spiritual awakening is what really opened my spiritual gifts up and allowed me to be able to develop and use them. And my purpose for existing, for still being here, is to share my story, which is why this podcast came about. Is I have all this knowledge that I need to share, and we are a soul living a human experience. And so we're supposed to be like a sponge, soaking up all this knowledge, all this experience, all these emotions, all these connections. And we're energetically like throwing a pebble into a still body of water. It creates that ripple effect. And so our purpose, no matter who or where you are, is to give love and to receive love and to learn from experiences through other people, through things that we go through, trials, tribulations, and to grow, to shape ourselves into these incredible beings of light and love. And the biggest message that I have come across in listening to other people's N.D.Es is that love is the name of the game. That's what we're here to do, and that opens up doors for us. So entering into the 5D is Christ consciousness. It's exactly that. It's love and light. And seeing and meeting Jesus was all about experiencing that divine, unconditional love, that agape love, which is pure, it's untainted. And when I channel a lot, I see sometimes white light, and that white light is pure energy. And when I experienced angels coming to me a few weeks before I lost my mom, I didn't realize that they were surrounding me in a white light of protection because I was about to go through my spiritual awakening. So sometimes I am still visited by angels. Sometimes I feel them, sometimes I see them. And I always have some sort of guide or energy that's helping me to navigate through these challenges, to navigate through spiritual portals, to navigate through readings for people, to be able to connect them to their loved ones. And so Spirit always gives me something I call a validation point. My ears ringing for confirmation. To let the person that I'm doing a reading for know that this is their person's energy that's coming through. And so some of the things were quite profound when I first started reading for people, and I started doing that because it was my soul's purpose. That's why I'm here, is to help make that connection as a medium from the living to the dead. So what changed as a result for me from all of my near-death experiences is I had my spiritual awakening. I realized that I wanted to live, that I wanted things to change for the better, And the profound experience for me was engaging with spirit, meeting Jesus, and really opening up to the possibility that we exist beyond this earthly plane. If you have a story you'd like to share on the podcast, please email me and we can discuss further. Have a great day.